I still remember that morning clearly. The house was quiet, too quiet. My daughter Amelia stood in the middle of the living room with her suitcase beside her. Her face was full of pride, her eyes cold. I could feel something was about to break between us. She looked straight at me and said, "Mom, I don't need your help anymore. I can handle my life." Those words hit me harder than anything I had ever heard. I wanted to say something to remind her how much I had done for her, but my throat felt heavy. I whispered her name, Amelia, but she didn't stop. She said I was controlling, that I always treated her like a child. I tried to explain that I only wanted her to be safe, but she laughed a sharp, painful sound that made my chest ache. She told me she didn't need my advice or my money. That last part broke me because she didn't know I had been secretly paying her rent, keeping her stable while she tried to start her life. But now she was throwing all my love back at me. I wanted to stop her, to tell her she was making a mistake, but something inside me said to let her go. Maybe she needed to fall to understand. So I stood there, watching her walk away without looking back. When the door closed, the silence that followed felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I sat down on the couch, staring at nothing, replaying her words again and again. The house felt empty, colder than ever. I told myself she would come back one day. One day, she would realize how much she needed me. I didn't know that day would come sooner than I thought, and in a way that would change everything between us. Perfect. Here's the next part of your cinematic revenge redemption story. Written in simple English and one continuous paragraph. From the mother's point of view, weeks passed after Amelia left, and every day felt longer than the one before. I tried to stay busy cleaning, cooking, pretending everything was fine, but deep down, I missed her voice. I wanted to call her so many times, but pride stopped me. I told myself she needed to learn. Then one evening, I saw her post on social media smiling, eating at fancy restaurants, buying new clothes. She looked happy-free. My heart ached, but I also felt relief. Maybe she really was doing well. But soon, her post stopped. Days went by, then weeks, with nothing. My heart started to worry again. I resisted calling her, but every night I stared at my phone, hoping she'd text. One night I finally gave in. I sent her a simple message, "How are you?" No reply. The next day, nothing. By the third day, I felt something was wrong. The following week, I went to her apartment. I stood at her door, knocked several times, but no one answered. When a neighbor passed by, I asked about her. The woman sighed and said Amelia had lost her job 2 weeks ago. My heart sank. The neighbor said she had been struggling with rent and had people coming to collect debts. I felt anger and pain all at once, not just at the world, but at Amelia's stubbornness. I had warned her about rushing into things, about trusting the wrong people, but she didn't listen. I wanted to step in right then, but another voice in my heart said no. Let her see what life is really like. Let her understand why I tried to protect her. That night, I sat in my car outside her building and watched as she came home. She looked tired, her face pale, eyes heavy with sadness. She didn't see me. She walked slowly, like someone carrying the weight of the world. It broke my heart, but I didn't move. I just watched. I told myself that sometimes love means stepping back, even when every part of you wants to reach out. I drove home in silence that night, whispering to myself, she will learn. She has to. Days turned into weeks, and I could see the cracks beginning to show in Amelia's life. I heard from a mutual friend that she was struggling to pay her rent, and the company she worked for had shut down unexpectedly. I didn't want to believe it, but when I drove by her apartment one evening and saw the lights off, I knew it was true. She wasn't living the life she had imagined. Her pride had led her into a storm, and now she was drowning in silence. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, torn between rushing in to help or letting her face the consequences of her choices. For years, I had protected her from pain, but now that same protection had made her blind to reality. She had to see what the world was really like without someone to clean up her mess. One afternoon, I saw her sitting alone at a small cafe. Her hair was messy, her eyes dull. She looked lost. I parked across the street and just watched, feeling a strange mix of sadness and quiet satisfaction. This wasn't revenge, not yet, but it was justice in a way. Life was teaching her what I couldn't. Still, a part of me wanted to run to her, hug her, and tell her everything would be okay. But I didn't. I couldn't. If I saved her now, she would never learn. That night, I received a message from an unknown number. It was short, "Mom, can we talk?" My heart jumped. After months of silence, she finally reached out. I wanted to reply instantly, but I waited. I needed her to understand that coming back to me wasn't just about needing help, it had to come from realization. A few hours later, another message came. "Please, I need you." Tears filled my eyes, but I still didn't respond. I sat there in my living room, staring at the phone, my heart breaking and healing at the same time. I whispered to myself, now she knows. But deep inside, I also knew this was just the beginning. The real lesson and the real pain was still to come. It was past midnight when my phone rang again. The sound startled me because I wasn't expecting anyone to call that late. When I looked at the screen, my heart almost stopped. It was Amelia. For a moment, I froze. My hand trembled as I held the phone, unsure whether to answer or let it ring. Part of me wanted to pick up immediately, to hear her voice and make sure she was safe, but another part of me remembered the day she walked away, her harsh words echoing in my mind. Still, a mother's heart never truly hardens. I took a deep breath and answered. "Amelia?" I said softly. Her voice on the other end was shaky and broken. "Mom, I didn't know who else to call." "I'm sorry." That one word "sorry" hit me harder than anything else. I closed my eyes, trying to control my emotions. She continued, "Everything fell apart. I lost my job, my friends stopped talking to me, and now I'm about to lose my apartment. I thought I could do it on my own, but I can't." Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't let her hear the pain in my voice. I stayed quiet for a moment before asking, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She sniffled and said, "Because I was ashamed. I didn't want to admit you were right." Those words were both painful and healing. I wanted to rush to her side, to take her in my arms like when she was a child, but something inside me said not yet. She needed to understand the value of humility and trust. I told her calmly, "Amelia, I'm glad you called me. But you have to understand something. Help isn't weakness. Pride can destroy more than failure ever could." She didn't answer, only sobbed quietly. I felt every tear like a dagger in my chest. Finally, I said, "I'll come tomorrow morning. We'll talk." When I hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at the phone. The silence around me felt heavy, but this time it wasn't anger, it was sorrow mixed with relief. She finally came back, but not as the confident woman who had walked away. She was broken, humbled, and desperate. Maybe this was the beginning of her change, or maybe the beginning of my revenge. Asterisk. The next morning, I woke up early. I barely slept the night before. My mind kept replaying Amelia's trembling voice, her apology, her pain. As I made a cup of coffee, I looked around the quiet house and thought about how empty it had been since she left. Now she was calling for help, and I didn't know whether to feel relief or anger. A part of me wanted to rush to her, hold her, and fix everything like I always did. But another part whispered, no, not this time. She had to see the consequences of her choices. She had to understand that love doesn't mean blind rescue, it means truth. When I reached her apartment, I could already sense something was wrong. The building looked worn down, and the hallway smelled like dampness and despair. I knocked on her door, and after a few seconds, she opened it. My heart broke at the sight of her. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, and her once perfect hair was a tangled mess. The confident daughter who had walked away months ago was now standing in front of me, fragile and lost. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded but said nothing. I stepped inside and looked around. The place was nearly empty. A few boxes, some clothes on the floor, and a table covered with unopened bills. She tried to smile, but it faded quickly. "I tried so hard," she said softly. "I wanted to prove I could do it without you." I looked at her and replied, "And what did you learn?" She lowered her head. "That pride is heavier than failure." Her answer struck deep. For a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to run to me when she scraped her knee, the one who trusted me without question. I wanted to hug her, but I stayed still. "Amelia," I said slowly, "you pushed me away when I tried to help. You hurt me deeply. And now you're asking for help again. Do you understand why that's hard for me?" She nodded, tears falling silently. "I know, Mom, I was wrong. I thought I knew everything. I was angry and stupid." Hearing her say that made my chest ache. I could feel my anger melting, but I couldn't let go completely. I said, "I'll help you, but not like before. This time you'll take responsibility. You'll rebuild, and I'll guide you, but I won't carry you." She nodded again, whispering, "I'll do anything." As I looked at her, I felt a strange calm wash over me. This wasn't revenge anymore, it was justice wrapped in love. A mother's version of tough mercy. I realized that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting what she'd done. It meant watching her grow strong enough to never make the same mistake again. The following weeks were quiet but heavy. Amelia moved back into her old room for a while, and though I was glad to have her home, the atmosphere was filled with unspoken tension. We both tiptoed around each other, careful not to say the wrong thing. Every morning I saw her sitting at the kitchen table, lost in thought, scrolling through job listings on her phone. The once confident and stubborn girl had turned into someone softer, quieter, almost fragile. I wanted to comfort her, but I held back. She needed to earn her peace, not be handed it again. Sometimes she would ask for advice, and I gave it, but without doing the work for her. When she complained that no one was hiring, I reminded her gently, "That's how life is. You can't expect doors to open if you don't knock long enough." She would nod quietly and return to her search. At night, I would hear her crying softly, thinking I didn't notice, but every sound broke my heart a little more. Still, I stayed strong. This was the price of pride, the pain that comes when we realize how much we've lost by thinking we could do everything alone. One afternoon, I came home and found her cleaning the house. She looked up and smiled shyly. "I thought I could help out," she said. That small gesture warmed me more than she knew. Slowly, she began taking responsibility, helping with chores, cooking dinner, even applying for part-time jobs. It wasn't easy, and she stumbled often, but each time she got back up, I saw a little more of the woman she was meant to be. One evening, while we were eating together, she looked at me and said quietly, "Mom, I don't deserve your kindness." I smiled faintly and replied, "You don't need to deserve it. You just need to respect it." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how far we'd come. The distance between us had been deep, but slowly, inch by inch, she was crossing it. Still, deep inside me, a small voice whispered that this peace might not last. Life has a strange way of testing people who think they've finally learned their lesson. And something told me Amelia's real test was still waiting for her, just around the corner. Just when I started to believe that peace had finally found its way back into our lives, the storm returned. It began quietly, the way trouble always does. One afternoon, Amelia came home from her new part-time job, her eyes red and her hands shaking. I asked what happened, but she just said, "Nothing, I'm fine," and went straight to her room. I didn't press her at first, thinking she needed time, but over the next few days, she became distant again. She barely ate, barely spoke. One night, I heard her talking on the phone, her voice trembling. She said something like, "You promised me. You said it would be okay." My heart sank. I knew that tone. It was the same one she had when she trusted the wrong people before. The next morning, I waited for her at breakfast. She sat down quietly, avoiding my eyes. "Amelia," I said gently, "what's going on?" For a moment she said nothing, then tears filled her eyes. "Mom, I trusted someone again. A friend from work. He said he could help me invest the little savings I had, and I believed him. But he disappeared with everything." I closed my eyes, feeling both anger and pain rise inside me. How could she fall for this again? How could she not learn? But when I looked at her, trembling, ashamed, I couldn't bring myself to scold her. I took a deep breath and said, "Sometimes life repeats the lesson until you finally learn it." She cried harder, saying, "I'm such a fool." I reached across the table, holding her hand. "You're not a fool, Amelia. You're human. But now you have to decide, will you stay broken or will you rise again?" She looked at me with tearful eyes, nodding slowly. Over the next few days, she fell into silence, sitting by the window for hours, lost in her thoughts. I could see her pride slowly breaking, layer by layer. She wasn't angry this time. She was reflective. One evening, she said quietly, "Mom, you always warned me about trusting too easily. I didn't listen. But I'm done being naive. I'll fix this." For the first time, I saw real determination in her eyes, not pride, not rebellion, but strength. I smiled faintly and said, "Good, because real strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up after you do." I didn't know it then, but this new fire inside her would soon lead to something far greater than I ever imagined, something that would test both our hearts and change the meaning of revenge forever. Asterisk. The days that followed felt different. Amelia no longer looked defeated. There was still sadness in her eyes, but it was mixed with something stronger, determination. She started waking up early, applying for better jobs, and spending her evenings learning new skills online. I watched her quietly, pretending not to notice, but inside, my heart swelled with pride. One morning, she came to me with a hopeful smile. "Mom, I got an interview," she said softly. I smiled back, trying to keep my tears from showing. "That's wonderful, Amelia. You deserve this." She nodded, her eyes shining with nervous excitement. For the first time in months, she seemed alive again. On the day of her interview, I stood by the window as she left, neatly dressed, confident but humble. I whispered a small prayer under my breath, hoping life would give her another chance. When she returned later that day, I could tell before she even spoke she got the job. She threw her arms around me and said, "Mom, they hired me." I hugged her tightly, feeling years of pain melt away in that single moment. It wasn't just about the job. It was about growth, about her finally finding herself again. Over the next few weeks, our home filled with warmth once more. We laughed during dinners, watched movies together, and talked late into the night. It felt like having my daughter back, not the proud, distant version of her, but the real one, the one I had missed for so long. One evening, as we sat outside watching the sunset, Amelia turned to me and said, "Mom, I finally understand why you were so protective. You weren't trying to control me, you were trying to save me from myself." Her words brought tears to my eyes. I looked at her and said quietly, "Every mother tries to protect her child, but sometimes the only way to learn is to let them fall." She nodded, her expression soft and thoughtful. For the first time, there was no wall between us. We talked honestly, openly, about everything that had gone wrong and how it led us here. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. My revenge wasn't about watching her suffer. It was about letting her face the truth until she became strong enough to face life on her own. In her pain, she found wisdom, and in her fall, I found peace. But deep inside, I knew our story wasn't over. Life always has one final test, and something told me ours was still waiting in the shadows. Peace never lasts forever, and I learned that the hard way. It had been 3 months since Amelia started her new job. She was doing well, responsible, calm, and far wiser than before. I was proud of her, but I also knew that life had a way of testing people right when they started to feel secure. One evening, she came home looking tense. She tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed her. "Is everything all right?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "Mom, there's something going on at work. A coworker has been trying to take credit for my projects. I confronted him today, and now my manager thinks I'm the problem." My heart sank. She was finally standing on her own feet, and now someone was trying to tear her down again. "Did you handle it calmly?" I asked. She nodded. "I tried. But he's spreading lies about me. I don't know what to do." I took a deep breath, remembering the countless times I'd wanted to protect her before. Part of me wanted to step in, call her manager, and defend her. But another part whispered, "This is her battle." So I said gently, "Then you fight with truth. Don't run away this time. Stand tall." She looked at me, uncertain but determined. The next few days were hard on her. I watched her leave every morning with tired eyes, forcing a brave smile. Each night she came home exhausted but refused to give up. Then, one afternoon, she called me from work, her voice shaking. "Mom, I did it." I showed the manager proof of everything he did. "He's being questioned right now." My heart swelled with pride. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. Later that evening, she came home with tears in her eyes, but they weren't from pain this time. "They believed me," she whispered. "He was fired." The manager apologized. I hugged her tightly, feeling my chest fill with relief. This time she didn't need me to fight her battles, she fought them herself. That night, as we sat together in the quiet, she said something that stayed with me forever. "Mom, I used to think you were my safety net. Now I realize you were my foundation." I smiled through my tears. "You were never meant to stay under my wings forever, Amelia. You were meant to fly." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time, I felt a deep peace. The revenge I once thought I wanted had turned into something else: redemption. Amelia had faced her fall, her pain, and her pride. And now she had risen stronger than ever. But before the night ended, I whispered a silent prayer of thanks. Because I knew this was the final test, and she had passed it. Months passed, and life slowly found its rhythm again. The house that once echoed with silence was now filled with laughter, the kind that comes from healing. Amelia had not only rebuilt her life, but also rebuilt the bond between us. Every evening, we would sit on the porch, drinking tea, talking about small things, and sometimes about the painful past that led us here. She often said, "Mom, I don't know how you found the strength to let me go back then." I would smile softly and say, "Because love isn't always about holding on, Amelia. Sometimes it's about letting go and trusting that the person you raised will find their way back." She would nod, eyes shining with emotion, and I could tell she truly understood now. One night, while watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "I used to think you wanted to control my life. But now I know you were just trying to protect me from my own mistakes." I looked at her and replied, "I wasn't trying to stop you from living your life. I was trying to stop you from losing yourself in it." For a long moment, we sat in silence, just watching the fading light, feeling the quiet peace that comes after a long storm. I thought about how much we both had changed. I had learned that revenge wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about proving that love could survive, even when pride tried to destroy it. My heart no longer carried anger or pain. Instead, it carried gratitude. Because sometimes life has to break you to show you what truly matters. And Amelia had learned that no amount of independence or success could replace the love and wisdom that family gives. Before going to bed that night, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled, tears slipping down my cheeks, and said, "I never could, Amelia. You're my daughter. Even when you turned your back, my love never did." When she went to her room, I sat there for a while, staring at the quiet house that once felt so empty but now felt alive again. I realized that forgiveness had healed what anger never could. In the end, life had come full circle. She had walked away, she had fallen, and she had returned stronger. And I had learned that true strength as a mother isn't in rescuing your child from every fall, but in giving them the courage to stand back up. Because love, real love, isn't about control, it's about faith. And that was the lesson both of us would carry forever.